This is Jerome Corsi, and today is Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. Thank you for joining us at thetruthcentral.com. We're broadcasting every weekday. Let's get right into the news. The first story I want to cover here is my favorite, John Kerry. Those of you who recall will know I co-authored with John O'Neill in 2004 the book Unfit for Command, as Swiftboat veterans speak out against John Kerry. Well, fortunately, as far as I'm concerned, John Kerry was not president, but he's hung around and he continues to cause all kinds of problems with Iran, and now he's in the climate movement. So he's a special presidential envoy for climate, John Kerry, saying that the world can't tackle climate change without first addressing emissions from agriculture. This is, again, Kerry basically wants us to stop this nitrous oxide, which I've written an article on. It'll be, I think, later this week in American Thinker. That's ridiculous. Nitrous oxide is not a major greenhouse gas. But the point of this agenda, the entire agenda, the attack on farming by Western leaders, I mean, it's shocking what they're doing. If you take a look at countries like the Netherlands, the Dutch government is going to close and seize 3,000 farms to comply with EU environmental rules. This is ridiculous. I mean, the whole purpose of the environmental movement initially was to be good stewards of the planet. But then as the left began to realize how they could shut down capitalism by saying, oh, we're destroying the planet, we have too much carbon dioxide, which is not a noxious chemical. We exhale carbon dioxide. It's plant food. The earth has had much more carbon dioxide and has not been destabilized by it. We have more carbon dioxide in ice ages. Carbon dioxide follows global warming. It doesn't cause it. The planet gets greener. We get more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's positive for the earth. It's not negative. Without greenhouse gases, they're not dangerous. Without greenhouse gases, the sun's irradiance, which hits the earth during the day, would evaporate back up into the sky, and this place would be uninhabitable, be too cold. But, if we're going to shut down farming, it's suicidal because it's going to have a major disruption of the food chain. So places like Minnesota, the Democratic Party has always been the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. I guess now it's time to take the farmer out as far as John Kerry's concerned. We've got a bunch of globalists, whiners. They're saying freedom deniers, wealthy wannabe tyrants. I guess that's John Kerry. So eating bugs is not a future for human beings. We're carnivores. And that's the nature of who we are. It's how we're built. So the idea here that we are going to simply eat bugs and be happy is ridiculous. And the earth is not warming up. I'm going to show you today several articles on this because we're essentially being lied to by the climate movement. It's more disinformation. All the government does is put out disinformation any longer. Even this Durham report, which is no one's prosecuted. We have one-sided justice in the country and no one's prosecuted. Instead, they published a report and said the Russian collusion was all a hoax, which I knew because I went through with the Mueller investigation. They wanted to indict me. Gave me a plea deal. I wouldn't take it. They did not indict me. They were the liars. So what good does it do to have a commission report 5 years after the fact? And it's ridiculous. It's just another form of cover-up. Well, we're being lied to about the environmental movement as well. And I want to get into this next article, a couple of articles here, because this one really is pretty alarming as well. France basically wants to join the United States, and they're going to train Ukrainian fighter pilots. Now, if that's not going to be suicidal also, I mean, essentially, look, Zelensky has got a deal going here. It's getting billions of dollars from Europe. And as I'm going to point out, I've pointed out many times, Ukraine's a corrupt country. That's just money to steal. And he, as long as he's got weapons from the NATO and the United States, he basically can continue to counter Russia. But if we withdrew that support, Ukraine would fall within 24 hours. Maybe it would take 48. But again, without that money and those weapons, which means that Russia knows that we're at war, NATO's at war, it's a proxy war, but we're fighting Russia right now. And if you give Zelensky fighter pilots and trained fighter planes and trained pilots, what Zelensky's saying he's going to do is he's going to strike Russia. He continually says he wants to attack areas of Russia that would be, key positions for him. He wants to, look, recently Zelensky favored occupying Russian villages to gain leverage over Moscow, bombing a pipeline that transfers Russian oil to Hungary, a NATO member, and privately pining for long-range missiles to hit targets inside Russia. This guy's going to start World War III. And it's over Ukraine. The French are going along with it. Before they start delivering planes, they're going to need to train the pilots. Once they start training the pilots, the planes are going to follow. And Russia's going to escalate the war. We're not going to have a stable situation. Tony Schaefer was with us yesterday. He's been a long-time foreign policy advisor. He's a former lieutenant colonel, retired in the Army. And he advised President Trump in 2020 on national security policy. And he agreed. He said if Russia looked like it was going to lose in Ukraine, they would use nuclear weapons. They're not going to lose. It's too important for Putin, and he's not going to lose he's not going to have a coup d'etat because he can't fight a war in Ukraine. This idea of giving, this is like giving matches to children. It's like giving, dynamite to people who are completely irresponsible. Zelensky's on a war mission because it's lucrative. If we look at the next article, we can see kind of some of some of these articles today really surprised me. And again, they're trends I've been following. But we now have the head of Ukraine's Supreme Court who's arrested for large-scale corruption. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter in Washington anymore because with the corruption of the Biden family not being investigated, not being prosecuted, but being obvious, we're supposed to just ignore all this. So now a corruption scandal is now broken out across Ukraine. It's got a national anti-corruption board and a specialized anti-corruption prosecutor's office. I think one of them is funded by Soros. And they're all corrupt. Well, now they've documented the head of the Supreme Court got a $2.7 million bribe. Well, that's actually pretty shocking, but not in Ukraine. It happens all the time in Ukraine. And, some of the pictures I've seen are tables full of cash. And the corruption in Ukraine, a wave of top officials resigning, which occurred recently. That was in January. Sports cars, mansions, luxury, vacations. The people of Ukraine are suffering. Ukraine is being destroyed. The entire infrastructure of the country is going. Certainly in the areas where Russia's attacked, they've destroyed the buildings. People have evacuated cities because they're not inhabitable. There's no electricity, there's no water, there's no power at all. The buildings are bombed out. There's no roads or infrastructure. You're dealing with a country that has been ravished by war, and it's one of the most corrupt countries on the face of the earth, and we're sending in billions of dollars that we're not accounting for. And the war is escalating. Russia said over the last couple of days that it took out a U.S.-supplied Patriot missile site with a hypersonic missile attack in Kiev, the capital city. Russia is now attacking Kiev. Russia starts bombing Kiev. The war is going to escalate. Kiev is the Kiev falls to Russia, Ukraine is gone. And the whole issue here is a war that I wrote an article this week on the Gateway Pundit that Hillary Clinton began this war in 2013. Hillary Clinton wanted money from the Clinton Foundation, which she got, and they basically started beating the drums to get rid of Yanukovych, who was a duly elected president at that time in Russia. The State Department targeted him because he was pro-Russian, a Ukrainian president, and they ousted him. Took the Maidan revolution, took Soros's money, took the State's Department. We engineered a coup d'etat in Ukraine through this Arab Spring methodologies, which is basically to start a protest movement, get people all in the streets, then begin toppling the government. Was it Soros' State Department concocted ritual that we did all across the Middle East? And we had these color revolutions, which Soros funded, to topple regimes we didn't like. The idea of bringing NATO and Finland into, bringing Ukraine and Finland into NATO is a dangerous idea because it's right on Russia's sphere of influence. Eastern Europe, it's like putting missiles in Cuba. Russia putting missiles in Cuba was Jack Kennedy in 1962. It's a direct threat on their border. These major superstates have to have these buffer areas that are influence, and for us it should be Latin America and Canada, Mexico. These should be areas where we consider to be our natural buffer zones. While Russia's going to look for Eastern Europe, China's going to look for pretty much all of Asia. But again, these superpowers are going to have their spheres of influence. That's what these are called in geopolitical terms. And if we violate that, if we try to deny Russia access to the Atlantic Ocean by having Finland in the north with access to the Baltic Sea in NATO, and Ukraine with access to the Atlantic Ocean through the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, Russia's not going to take kindly to it. And this war is escalating. Chris, would you like to comment?
Let's see. Start a protest movement, get the people riled up, and overthrow a government. That sounds awful familiar.
Yeah, it's a formula the State Department and Soros concocted, and they've used it over and over and over again. And, we shouldn't be in the regime change business. We're supposed to be here a republic, not a dictatorship or another country that's about imperialism, which is what we're proving to be the case. And again, it's reasonable for us to want to defend the United States, but this foreign involvement in Ukraine is, I think, just absolutely insane. And I don't know why why the American people haven't been much more active about wanting to put an end to it. I don't think the American people realize how dangerous this is, how close this could come to a nuclear war. We're on the verge of a World War III. It may have already started. Chris?
As you said, it's been a proxy war for a long time. We've had several proxy wars with Russia over the many years. The obvious ones were Vietnam and Korea, but that's more China in that respect. But if you look at Iran-Iraq war, that was another proxy war between the two. One side kept feeding, our side fed missiles and weapons to one side, their side fed them to the other. We've had this for a long time. It looks like it's finally coming to a head today. The difference is we're not fighting the actual Communist Party, but we're fighting a former KGB who, again, wants to tell the world, or wants to show the world, that he can rebuild the old Soviet Union in his own image.
Well, I've always argued, even when I was in graduate school at Harvard, that these countries may become communist, but they're still nation states, and they still act as traditional nation states. They have national interests, and as such, Russia can be communist, or it could be whatever it is today, some hybrid mix of everything, but it's still going to want Eastern Europe to be its sphere of influence. And we've had proxy wars over Eastern Europe going back to the end of World War II, when fundamentally at the Yalta Conference at the end of World War II, Roosevelt was very ill and also sided with Stalin. I think Roosevelt went into World War II to help Stalin more than to help Churchill. And I hope to write some books on that too. But the point is, we've had conflicts over Eastern Europe ever since World War II. We've had revolts in Czechoslovakia. We've had revolts in Hungary when they were still communists, which we supported and didn't support. Poland with the Solidarity movement, which we did support. I hear the dog there. I hope the dog's taking my vital C.
Yes, and he's a little upset about this whole proxy war thing as well.
Well, I can imagine.
He says it's getting rough.
Well, the dog's got good sense, you know. I mean, the dogs mostly do. And okay, let's cover these next seven. So, by the way, we do have a video up here from Matt McMillan on annuities. It's the Truth Central special presentation, Annuities and Insurance Planning with Matt McMillan of the McMillan Agency. And it will also be on his page under the sponsors. And if you just even click the sponsor page, you'll see the sponsors all together. Drop-down menu, you can find the McMillan Agency. I think it benefits you if you watch the video and get in touch with Matt. All right, now the next one, Morgan Stanley, has come out with a study. We covered it yesterday about the minerals that are going to have to be mined with these electric vehicles. Like it's astonishing, basically, how much we're willing to essentially rip up the earth to have electric vehicles. But Morgan Stanley, this is the global director of their research, her name Kathy Huberty, in a note to her clients, basically saying that the Global Autos Research Desk says that it'll take a complete rewiring of the electric vehicle supply chain to meet the goals of, 2/3 of all cars by 10 years being electric vehicles. The world's going to need essentially a multipolar world. The United States, Russia, and China, that's multipolar. It's not a U.S. superpower. It's not U.S. v. Russia. It's now Russia, China, and the United States. Even though they're much smaller economies, they're up and growing and forming much more of a strong alliance with this BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're going to have a meeting the first week of June, and up to 19 countries want to join the BRICS. But what the Morgan Stanley is saying is it's going to take $7 trillion investment because to get the supply chain for the batteries need to have these rare earth minerals. And if the West wants to drive electric vehicle adoption to meet decarbonization goals, while also mitigating national security concerns, they're saying that a radically new battery supply chain will need to be created with developments in battery chemistry having the potential to widen the menu of technologies available to meet climate goals. The estimate of the total $7 trillion investment will be needed in the electric vehicle battery supply chain by 2040. Figure that assumes an array of targeted regulations and politics to facilitate an onshore decarbonized battery supply chain. They think it may require more than a decade to achieve the industrialization and standardization gated by a host of geopolitical, environmental, and economic considerations. Sounds like a regulatory field day. Regulators are going to get in here and have regulations. They'll have a telephone book full of, probably stack them 10 feet high of the regulations they're going to write with paper. And right now, the electric vehicle battery supply chain is largely controlled by China. China has 90% of the market. And essentially, market forces alone are not going to be enough to get us to have our own electric vehicle battery supply chain in place. So essentially, what we're seeing is the re-engineering of the entire economy on this hoax that we've got global warming. And if we don't do something, the planet is going to get so warm, we're going to all die. I published this book, The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change. I really encourage you to read it climate science. This is not climate science. This is Marxist ideology. And it's aimed to destroy capitalism. They want us not to farm. They want us to not have not have gas stoves. They want everything to be electricity. Well, if everything were electricity, we don't have the possibility of a big enough grid system. We'll be actually building brownouts and shutdowns of electricity into the system. We try to switch everything over to wind and solar. It's not going to work. And the left knows this. They don't intend the problem to be solved. What they intend to do is to use this to shut down the modern industrial state and to depopulate. It's a depopulation movement at its core. I think these next two articles also make the case. There's a lot coming out today. This is actually was from Time magazine, which is, basically, this was Time magazine, basically saying, and it surprised me to see this in Time, that the nuclear energy's moment has come. Just the first paragraph of the Time magazine article. For all the recent talk about clean energy and a shift away from coal, there's a major problem in our goal to transition to a net zero carbon economy. Despite all the growth and advances in renewable energy globally, we consume more fossil fuels than ever, and our rate of carbon dioxide production is in fact increasing, not heading to zero. But there's a bipartisan, environmentally friendly solution just sitting on the table, waiting for its moment. If only we can overcome our predetermined bias. And this is Robert Oppenheimer's grandson is writing this and saying, I believe my grandfather would support the expansion of nuclear energy, an environmentally friendly solution to address the world's energy problems and perhaps counterintuitively as a catalyst for peace and unity. Well, of course, Oppenheimer headed the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos during World War II, developing the atomic bomb. He afterwards became very concerned about its use and had major problems politically. But this is remarkable that this is by Charles Oppenheimer, and he's an entrepreneur and an investor representing the family of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the scientist. And it's extremely interesting because I don't think that the global warming crowd wants a solution. The solution they want is to shut down the modern industrial state to end capitalism. If it ends up supporting nuclear energy, which is a rational solution to the problem, and this has been envisioned even by Julian Simon, who was one of the natural resource and economists who was back in the 50s was saying, we're not going to run out of oil. It's a natural product made naturally in the earth. It's abiotic. It's not dinosaur soup. The chemistry for it is understood. But what the World Health Organization wants, what John Kerry wants, what the radical left wants, what the neo-Marxists want, is to destroy capitalism. That's why all the proposals they're seeing mean an end to the standard of living which the modern industrial state can provide if we have a cheap, readily available power source. And nuclear is endlessly available. The technology is there. We run the Navy on nuclear power. We don't have nuclear accidents with the Navy every day. It can be done safely. And if this movement starts to take hold, my prediction is it's going to upset the environmental movement that's now the net zero emissions movement, which is essentially an anti-capitalist movement, because that's not the solution. They don't want a solution. They want a problem in order to destroy. Communists destroy. They don't create. And as I point out, what they did to Ukraine in the 1930s, what Stalin did is he had mass famine with his farm collectivization project. And they intentionally starved millions of the Ukrainian peasants who were Russian favored. They were Russian, men spoke Russian, but they didn't favor communism. So he got rid of them, starved them to death. And that's, again, the noble cause, save the earth, fiction, carbon dioxide is going to kill us all. and then take radical measures to shut down the modern industrial state. That's the plan. Now, this last one here is really going to be interesting because we have now Oliver Stone, who's got a new movie coming out now called Nuclear Now, and I've got actually the link to it there. Go to the Nuclear Now website. He's basically saying climate change, the existential crisis, and the challenge of our times. He's saying that the nuclear power is the solution. Now, with a new movie out like this from Oliver Stone, it's going to get attention, and it's going to upset. I predict the climate change movement is going to come out against this with everything they've got. They've got to destroy this initiative, or they will lose their movement. They don't want a solution. They want a problem that they can use to destroy. So what Oliver Stone is saying, with unprecedented access to the nuclear industry in France, Russia, and the United States, Nuclear Now explores the possibility for the global community to overcome the challenges of climate change and energy poverty to reach a brighter future through the power of nuclear energy. Now, Oliver Stone is buying that there is climate change needed, or we're undergoing climate change. We've got to end it. He's buying into that narrative because he really wants to promote nuclear energy as the solution. And it's ironic that there is this solution to the global warming. Well, if there's global warming, fine. We'll just use nuclear. Doesn't emit carbon dioxide. So problem over. Well, that's not what they want. Beneath our feet, uranium atoms in the Earth's crust hold incredibly concentrated energy. This is Oliver Stone. Science unlocked this energy in the mid-20th century, first for bombs, then for power to power submarines. The United States led the effort to generate electricity from this new source, yet in the mid-20th century, as societies began to transition to nuclear power and away from fossil fuels, a long-term PR campaign to scare the public began, funded in part by the coal and oil interests. This campaign would sow fear about harmless, low-level radiation and create confusion between nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. Looking squarely at the problem, Oliver Stone shows us that knowledge is the antidote to fear, and our human ingenuity will allow us to solve the climate change crisis if we use it. The left doesn't want to use it. So Oliver Stone, again, is going to have a lot of opposition from the left over this. Chris, do you want to comment?
There's nothing like a good Oliver Stone movie to kind of perk people up a little bit and make people more aware of what's going on sometimes. I know there's some controversy involved and some embellishment as far as who's acting where and the dramatic effect as far as biographies, but this is important. The idea is if nuclear power becomes the new green energy, like you were saying, Jerry, the people, the activists, the people that are screaming, they'll become useless. And their mission, as you said, was to end capitalism, but also, as some of their activists, like the Greta girl said, end the patriarchy, to demolish the patriarchy, if you will. So they're like the boogeymen that these people are trying to make money off of, I guess, and trying to gain social credit off of.
What they're really doing is they're attacking the culture of capitalism. My second book on this Great Awakening trilogy, following the energy book, is in press right now. It'll be out sometime this year, which is on the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. Is that we're going through an age right now where the left has control of the media. And what they're doing, after Gramsci, who was an Italian communist, they realized that Marx didn't work. There was no workers of the world didn't revolt in the 1860s or 40s, 1848. And Gramsci said, well, we've got to attack the culture of capitalism. So the attack started focusing on the family, on God, on sexuality. That was advanced by the Frankfurt School, which embraced sexuality. Sexual revolution is the way to really break down traditional mores. And the goal was to destroy the modern industrial state. They combined with postmodernism. They challenged the Enlightenment. They said science isn't our solution. They wanted a utopia around very vaguely stated Marxist goals. We're all going to share, everything's going to be equal, we're going to have social justice. All these things which divide us were intended to divide us. Marxism is capable of destroying. Marxism has only killed millions of people. No Marxist state has ever worked. These are bad ideas. They're like a mental virus that infect people. Bad programming. It's like a malware in the brain. And once the youth are indoctrinated and they go around screaming social justice in your face all the time, everything is racist, fundamentally, we lose reason. They don't want solutions. They want to be able to assert whatever they feel like is them. They want to make that the universal rule for everybody. And we're getting bizarre results from this on gender, on race. And traditional ideas are breaking down. We're going into a almost schizophrenic reality where the schizophrenics are in charge. It's a frightening time right now in human history when it's apparent, as we've just discussed in this program, that there are solutions. Even if you assume climate change were real, there's solutions. Nuclear energy. The nuclear energy is a good idea anyway, because it's obviously inexhaustible. And while I say fossil fuels are not fossil fuels, they're abiotic, and they are also readily available and abundant. Even Julian Simon said, well, there'll come another source of energy, and you'll have abundant fossil fuel, abundant coal energy, oil and natural gas, because you won't have gotten anywhere near exhausting them, and they're being replenished by the earth on a continuous basis before we run out. We're not running out. That was a big movement. The peak oil crowd had to pack up their tents and go away because it didn't work. We didn't run out of oil like they predicted. And now we have solutions, but the solutions require thinking. The solutions require intelligence. They require science, not ideology. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. I always say in ending these programs, at the end, God always wins. God will win here too. Sometimes I hesitate to think what it's going to take to win, but God will win. And I think it would be good for us to be on the side of God. I think we should all pray over 2 Chronicles 7:14. And this is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. We'll be back tomorrow and Friday, every weekday. Thank you for joining us. God bless.